Turning to the car industry now, because the US and Europe have been going after China recently for unfairly propping up its electric car industry. In fact, the European Commission's anti-subsidy investigation is wrapping up in the coming week.
Well, that's okay if he does that, that's fine, but the United States is subsidizing Canada. It's truly a subsidy, and we shouldn't have to do that.
We're thinking in terms of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
Because trade ties are breaking apart and Canada just made a move that no one saw coming. In an unexpected shift, Canada is turning its back on U.S. electric vehicles and pivoting toward European automakers. With the U.S. slapping steep tariffs on Canadian goods and tensions reaching a boiling point, Canada is looking elsewhere for its EV future. Could this be the moment that shatters North America's auto industry? And with supply chains already stretched to their limits, is this the beginning of a new global EV alliance? Join us today as we break it all down. But before diving in, like this video and subscribe for more insights on the latest geopolitical updates. Tariffs, trade wars, and tough talk test North America's EV industry.
China has an intentional, state-directed policy of overcapacity and oversupply designed to cripple our own industries. We simply will not allow that to happen.
2025 is shaping up to be the most turbulent year yet for North America's booming EV industry. With trade tensions escalating and supply chains under siege, the sector faces challenges like never before. Some believe that one day North America will have the manufacturing strength to stand independently, free from these tangled trade dependencies. But for now, the truth is undeniable. Canada, the US, and Mexico remain deeply intertwined, and one wrong move could send shockwaves through the entire global economy. The first weekend in February saw the curtain lift on the opening act of a political melodrama continuing to unfold on the North American stage. On February 1st, President Donald Trump made good on his threat to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican goods. The measure is being presented as responding to a danger to U.S. national security for what Trump describes as Canada and Mexico's complacency concerning the flow of drugs and illegal immigrants into the United States.
In 2024, Mexico was the largest importer of goods to the U.S., ahead of China, accounting for $466 billion.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back that left us.
Following Trump's executive order, Canadian officials quickly announced their round of 25% tariffs on U.S. goods. As well, premiers across the country announced measures such as canceling contracts held by American companies and the banishment of American liquor, beer, and wine from provincial alcohol retailers. Amid the political din, Mexico managed to negotiate a tenuous pause in tariff implementation in the hope they could negotiate a resolution with the Trump administration over the next 30 days. Then, hours before tariffs against Canada were set to go into effect on February 3rd, Ottawa and Washington also reached a month-long temporary trade truce. At 12:01 a.m. on February 4th, 10% tariffs went into effect for Chinese imports to the U.S. Despite staving off an immediate crisis on its shores, North America remains divided. The three countries are in limbo for the next 30 days, waiting to see if they can negotiate an agreement they can each claim as a success.
In 2024, Mexico was the largest importer of goods to the U.S., ahead of China, accounting for $466 billion in imports.
And somewhere in the middle of the power struggle is an auto industry already grappling with a transition to zero-emission vehicles and the creation of a robust North American battery supply chain. The sector is shakier than ever, and a future is anything but certain. These tariffs introduce severe risks to the stability of the auto sector, reads a letter from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association to its members. The auto sector operates on just-in-time logistics, meaning sustained disruptions could force temporary closures. The tariffs may cause immediate bottlenecks in cross-border shipments, forcing companies to reconfigure sourcing strategies. U.S. manufacturers relying on Canadian parts will face higher costs, leading to increased vehicle prices for consumers. It's a sentiment being echoed across every border in North America. All in all, say experts, it's a continental catfight that will likely end in economic hardship for almost 530 million citizens, damage to the reputation of North America, and perhaps cede valuable ground in a global arms race to full battery electrification and production. Electric vehicles on the line.
We're listening to automakers, we're listening to workers. Shortly, we will be introducing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum.
Last week, Linda Hasenfratz, CEO of auto parts titan Linamar, issued a dire warning. A tariff war with the United States would bring the industry to its knees. Her stark declaration came as Linamar unveiled a monumental $1 billion reinvestment into its Canadian production facilities. A significant portion of the investment is fueling the development of EV parts manufacturing. Yet Hasenfratz did not hold back. She warned that auto production in Guanajuato, Mexico, Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario would grind to a halt within a week if tariffs were imposed at any moment. That chilling forecast is reverberating across Canada, voiced by elected officials, EV industry leaders, and membership coalitions alike. The EV sector, a fragile yet rapidly emerging supply chain in North America, is already battling growing pains. Now the storm of continental trade instability looms, threatening devastation and unlocking greater opportunities. There is an element of never waste a good crisis, says David Adams, president and CEO of the Global Automakers of Canada, in an interview with Electric Autonomy. We finally seem to have consensus from the federal government and every provincial leader that, perhaps we must take action on these interprovincial trade barriers, which in some cases can add as much as 20% to the cost of goods. Canada could awaken a bit and realize that they cannot simply rely on the effortless guarantee of access to the U.S. market. That development could cast intriguing shadows on the future of the Canadian EV manufacturing sector. Interprovincial trade represented roughly 55% of overall trade flows in the early 1980s, but has fallen to 36% today, declares a recent Scotiabank report. A 2019 IMF study revealed that sectors aiming to trade interprovincially incur non-geographic costs equivalent to a 21% tariff.
That dark bit there, that's the US. You can see how dominant China is when it comes to the cells, but also the chemicals inside the cells. The cathodes, China massively dominant there. The anodes, the graphite that you need inside these batteries as well. And we could extend this and look at other things as well, like hydrogen you can do.
Is there a future where critical minerals mined and refined in facilities across Canada might be ferried interprovincially to battery factories, which in turn would dispatch battery cells and packs to automotive assembly plants in other parts of the country, where finished vehicles are then sent to Canadian dealerships for retail? Adams believes so. Canada can seize the moment and position itself as an inviting, steadfast destination for foreign direct investment. He asserts, "We are not going to impose tariffs on other nations. That is not our usual practice. So I believe there is an opportunity for Canada to craft a new sales pitch for foreign direct investment. The currency of predictability."
Predicting in this severe scenario, yes, inflation goes up. By how much? Again, depends on too many things to calculate ahead of time.
Most political standoffs unfold like Greek tragedies, where the real drama plays out behind closed doors, in back rooms, and on secure phone lines hidden from public scrutiny. But the battle over tariffs is a spectacle for the world to see, unfolding under the unforgiving glare of the international spotlight. For those not directly caught in the crossfire, the public nature of this clash may seem like riveting political theater. Yet for Canada and the U.S., the consequences could be severe. Business-like certainty, Adams warns. In a world growing more unpredictable by the day, the value of stability will only rise. For the past 3 years, Canada has made no secret of its aggressive campaign to lure foreign investment and cement itself as a key player in the EV battery supply chain. The strategy has been bold: massive government subsidies and tax breaks, global trade missions to Asia and Europe, and a firm declaration that Canada will not be outmatched by the U.S. and the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, which carved out a significant portion of its $300 billion budget for zero-emission vehicle supply chains.
Sportswear imports went up 50% during the same time and jumped over 80% during the March to December period. At the same time, container imports from China to the United States have surged.
Whether this ambitious stance is part of what has provoked Trump's ire when he claims we aren't treated well by Canada remains uncertain. But given his long-standing grievances over USMCA, a deal he once championed as incredible, and his obsession with U.S. trade deficits, one thing seems clear. Canada's determination to claim the biggest possible share of the EV boom is a challenge to its neighbor's dominance, and that may be a fight Trump is unwilling to ignore. The U.S. is reliant on our crude oil, our uranium, on our potash, on our high-grade metal, on our electricity. Ontario powers 1.5 million homes, keeps the lights on New York and Michigan and Minnesota and many other areas, said Ontario Premier Doug Ford in a recent interview with CNN. We want to ship down more products, more critical minerals, more oil. We'd rather have a strong trading partner with the U.S., build an AmCan fortress. Mining is the least affected.
Rate is. And in this particular group, we had 3 or 4 different products. Some were at 6% duty, some were at 12.5% duty. And the aggregate of all of this came to a total duty of $6,100.
Els says that while tariffs, or even their mere threat, are wreaking havoc on the upstream supply chain, he believes the mining sector within battery manufacturing will likely remain unscathed. The reason? Mining operates on an entirely different timeline than auto retail and parts supply. It plans in decades, not days. In all probability, mining operations and ongoing projects across Canada and North America will move forward as scheduled. However, the same cannot be said for the refining of critical minerals. The original plan was to phase out reliance on Chinese minerals gradually. At the same time, North American refiners built up their infrastructure, secured suppliers, and scaled operations. Now, with Trump's 10% tariff on Chinese goods in force, retaliation from China is widely expected, potentially tightening restrictions on battery minerals even further. China has readied a trade war arsenal, Els warns. They already enforce strict export restrictions and tight controls over battery materials, processing, and technology. If they face severe trade tariffs, they could detonate the entire system. Graphite is a glaring example. China supplies nearly 90% of the U.S.'s graphite. If Beijing decides to cut off exports, that would actually drive the U.S. straight into Canada's arms, Els says. Canada may lack extensive processing facilities, but it possesses the raw materials, a shift that could trigger a boom.
If the U.S. has ulterior motives and insists on waging a tariff war, trade war, or any other kind of war, China will fight the U.S. till the end. We advise the U.S. to put away its bullying face and return to the right track of dialogue and cooperation before it is too late.
The trade disputes over the last week are unprecedented in 90 years of Canadian-American relations. No one can predict how this situation will unfold, but its significance cannot be overstated. With over $1 trillion in goods moving across North America's borders each year, the stakes are immense. What is certain, at least in the short and medium terms, is that a trade war between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico would bring instability and economic harm to all 3 nations. Perhaps decades from now, North America will have built the manufacturing strength to stand more independently. But for now, for better or worse, the industries of each country remain deeply intertwined with their neighbors, bound together in a fragile economic balance. Canada imposing 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles.
We are transforming Canada's automotive sector to be a global leader in building the vehicles of tomorrow. But actors like China have chosen to give themselves an unfair advantage in the global marketplace, compromising the security of our critical industries and displacing dedicated Canadian autos and metalwork.
Canada, following the lead of the United States, on Monday said it would impose a 100% tariff on the import of Chinese electric vehicles, and also announced a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum from China. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said Ottawa was acting to counter what he called China's intentional, state-directed policy of overcapacity. However, he did not specify whether tariffs would be softened or would be the same for Tesla, whose shares were down over 3% on Monday after the announcement. I think we all know that China is not playing by the same rules, he told reporters. The tariffs will be imposed starting on October 1st this year. What is important about this is we're doing it in alignment and parallel with other economies around the world, Trudeau said on the sidelines of a 3-day closed-door cabinet meeting in Halifax, Nova Scotia. The Chinese embassy in Ottawa was not immediately available for comment. Ottawa will continue to work with the United States and other allies to ensure that customers around the world are not unfairly penalized by non-market practices of countries such as China, Trudeau said. Ottawa is also looking at further punitive measures, such as tariffs on chips and solar cells, Trudeau said, without giving any details. Joe Biden in May announced a quadrupling of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles to 100%, a doubling of duties on semiconductors and solar cells to 50%, as well as new 25% tariffs on lithium-ion batteries and other strategic goods, including steel to shield firms from Chinese excess production. Earlier this month, the European Union imposed tariffs of up to 36.3% on EV imports. Ottawa is trying to position Canada as a critical part of the global EV supply chain and has come under pressure from domestic industry to act against China.
Will be, higher prices in the grocery stores right away.
So we begin with the breaking news. A fresh trade war between the US and China has just kicked off. An hour and a half ago, the US went ahead with its promise of 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods headed to the US.
China is Canada's second largest trading partner, although it trails far behind the US. Data from Canada's largest port in Vancouver showed that imports of automobiles from China at the port jumped 460% annually in 2023 when Tesla started shipping Shanghai-made EVs to Canada. Tesla has remained tight-lipped about its Chinese exports to Canada, which began in early 2023. However, vehicle identification codes confirmed that Model 3 sedans and Model Y crossovers were making their way from Tesla's Shanghai Gigafactory to Canadian roads. But now, Canada has turned its back on the European Union, severing trade ties in a dramatic shift. With new tariffs upending the auto market, Tesla is expected to reroute its exports, shifting production back to the U.S. In response to the tariffs, I would expect Tesla to adjust its logistics and begin exporting vehicles to Canada from the U.S., says Seth Goldstein, equity strategist at Morningstar. But there's a catch. Higher production costs in the U.S. could squeeze Tesla's profits, a reality that investors are already reacting to. Canada has made its choice, breaking away from U.S. EVs and forging new ties with Europe. But is this a bold step toward economic independence or a risky gamble that could backfire? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe.